Hello, I'm Jeff Byers, and welcome back. This is Module 2, Andy 235, and we are in Lesson 14, where we had just finished in Lesson 13, Part 13, putting the ear on and mirroring over the face and fixing all the vertices by merging. And so now I'm just going to have you guys prep the model just a little bit farther, and then I'll show you how to render out with the 3-point light system and put it in the best light possible that we can for grading. So it's really important that you give me some really nice clean renders for grading and screenshots, so I know exactly what's happening and I can grade you appropriately. Right, so the first thing we're going to do is you need to place the eyes, a couple spheres in there, and then once you do that, we're going to go ahead and combine it. So click on this icon right here, or you can go hold down the spacebar, go to Mesh, Combine. So let's go ahead and do that. Next thing I want you to do is make sure you're under Poly Modeling on your shelf, and let's go ahead and center pivot. It won't hurt anything. Delete by type history and freeze transformations. Now I modeled it up on top because I have a body that I've been working with, that I've modeled, and now what I'm going to do is I've just got it up here. Don't worry if you're at the center of your scene, it's not a problem, and you can move it up later. That's why I just wanted to tell you that that's why mine looks like this. So, all right, yours does not have to be above the ground plane like that. Okay? And if that bothers you, I can place it down on the ground plane, okay? All right, so it doesn't matter, right? All right. So, what does matter is what I'm going to go through now. We're not really there as far as placing a subsurface scatter on there. Some of you would like to mess around with that, and that's okay. Go ahead and feel free if you like to kind of put a subsurface scattering on that if you want to. I'm not going to really cover that today. I just want a good render, and we could put a flesh tone on there and have the eyes wide if you want to, or you could go in there and add a material to the eyes if you'd like, just to make it look more human. It's entirely up to you. I'm not requiring it, and we're not really ready to get into subsurface materials. I'll say that for a different time. But some of you want to play with that kind of stuff. Go ahead, that's fine. But it better look good. In fact, I probably would just recommend to you that you just stick with what I'm going to teach you today, so we can get that looking good, so I can grade it. Alright, so I need a low poly and I need a high poly right next to it. So let's go ahead and, once it's combined, after we delete it by type history, then we're going to go ahead and do a Control D. And let's just move that over to the side over here like this. They need to be totally separated and in a perspective. So in a perspective like this. So I need basically a perspective like this, and a perspective like this. Okay. So we got a lot of screenshots coming our way, so I can make sure you got the ear right and looking good. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and I'm not too worried about having this in the render, the low poly in a render. I'd rather have this in the render. It just actually distracts me having that in the render, but we will have it in there. We don't need it, but I do need the wireframe of both. Okay, so click on this guy. Again, it's your responsibility to make sure that you do not smooth this yet. You got it. You have to have a low poly of this object at all times. In fact, I'd probably make 3 or 4 copies of that low poly so you can get back at it. This is the only one, and we're just gonna do it. We're not using the high poly, just for rendering, right? Rendering purposes only. That's why we actually add this and smooth this. So let's go ahead and go to Mesh and Smooth, and we want to smooth at 2. That gives me a really smooth version of that. Okay, so that's really what I want to see in our when we do renders. Okay, Make sure that eyes aren't popping out or anything weird like that. Again, I do not expect you to texture this, like seriously texture with subsurface scattering and put a texture on it. We're not ready for that. That comes later. So if you want to play, fine, but don't put it in your renders, okay? Because you might mess it up and I won't be able to see your models. I really need to see how your models look, okay? So that's really super important to me. Screenshots first, you know. Obviously, screenshots are really, really nice to have. So we'll start with that. How do we get a full view of this? We want to get some nice screenshots. Everybody asks me that. Up at the top in the workplace, just go to export, and that gives you a full frame. Okay. The easiest way to do this is full frame. There's other ways you can do that, but let's go type in S, and we'll start with the screenshots of what I want, and then we'll work our way into the renders. Okay, so go to mode on this, and go to, I'm just going to show you this one time, rectangular snip, and I'll move that out of the way. Now that leaves, because I do this in the same viewport, it leaves this weird little thing here. So I'm going to cancel that. Do this again, snipping tool, and we'll get it set up right, and I'm going to move it out of the window to keep from having that little weird thing, ghosting icon there. So I'm going to move it over and click on mode and rectangle snip, and then now I can just go ahead and do a screenshot. This will be smooth shade all on one side, okay, and you can name it something like save as your first name. Always put your name on every single file. I appreciate that in case they get lost. I teach 4 classes, so okay, there we go. Any 235, and we've got this is perspective, and this is shade, the left side. Alright, so there's that one, and what I'm going to do is I'm just going to highlight that, so I'm going to have to keep typing this in. Control C, and save that to your desktop or wherever you'd like to save it. And then we're going to just continue to the right side, so I can get all of this in there. There we go. Give me that. I can see both. You got to have space between the heads when you do perspectives, okay? So if you need more space, just move them around. Alright, do the same thing with this. S, snipping tool. Same old thing. Right here. Let's do this very quickly, as fast as we can. And guess I didn't save it. There we go. And we'll just call this right side. Just put the R in there. There we go. Alright, so that's done. Then we're going to do wireframe on shaded with this. Wireframe shaded. Screenshot. No. Snipping tool. And do the same thing on this one. Wireframe on. Alright, right side is type in wire. Alright, great. And then we'll do the other side like that. Make sure you have space between them. Make sure you get a full screen. And we'll just type in left on that. There we go. Screenshots are done. Right, so I'm going to pause the video and get everything set up for rendering. Okay, so now we're ready to start rendering. So we've got our screenshots and we need to do our renders. So we'll do 4 of these renders. And so let's go ahead and take a look at... Oh, we need to do one more screenshot probably from the back, like this, and that should be good enough from the back. I just want to see what's going on in the back. So we'll do one more screenshot. Let's type in back right here for this last one. So now we'll have 5 altogether, and just not worry about that left side or right side. That's good enough. We'll just do one back. And that's good for that. Let's go ahead and swing this back around, and let's turn off wireframe on shaded, which is this icon right here. And what we're going to do is we need to separate these. So I'm going to hold down, click on the object, hold the space bar down, go to mesh, and we're going to separate. Okay. Do the same thing with this guy right here, the high poly, mesh, separate. That just separates the eyes. We're going to keep the eyes white, okay, and then the head part will do kind of a fleshy color. Alright, so with that said, let's go ahead and select all these objects that are eyes, spheres, and go to assign new material, and we'll go to Arnold shader, and we'll click on AI standard surface, and we'll keep that as white, and we'll have that turned all the way up. And let's see, the specular is fine. We'll just leave as is for that. And then for the head, let's go ahead and select both of those and go to assign new material and Arnold shader, AI standard surface, and in here we want to do, let's turn the weight up, let's do kind of a fleshy color, somewhere around between orange and red will work. And you can have whatever color of skin you'd like to add, whatever works best for you. Okay, here we go. Something like that will work just fine. Again, you can kind of play around with the colors if you'd like. Let's go in here. Looks like I lost my... There we go. Alright, so let's go back in here. And so let's see what we get here. Okay, AI standard surface. Let's go ahead and rename that to skin shader. There we go. Whoops. Need an S in there. And let's do TX. There we go. Alright, so that should have the same skin shader on it. And then the eyes, let's call this eye texture, TX. And that should actually go over to the rest of them too as well. Okay, so that's good. So we got the skin shader on there, and we'll see how it looks. It's going to look kind of porcelain looking, but we'll see how it looks, and we can kind of tweak it out from there. But right now we're going to do a 3-point light system. So I'm going to have you guys, we're going to look at this. Basics on lighting. I'm not exactly sure what you were taught in other classes, so I'm just going to go over it really quick. So 3-point light system is a standard that has been used for video, film, and photography and computer-generated imagery. So basically, if you want to light a object properly, you're going to need to have a key light, a fill light, and a backlight. Okay, so let's kind of take you through it. The key light basically is the main light. It's the strongest light. It's going to have the highest intensity, and it's basically going to cast the shadow in CG. Okay, we're talking CG, computer graphics. Okay, now the fill light is a secondary light. It's placed on the opposite. Usually we kind of follow that 45-degree angle, between. All right. So the idea is between a 90-degree angle between here and here, we kind of set it at about a 45-degree angle. Okay. And I usually have, it's a softer light. I usually have it about 50% of what I have the key light. Okay. And then the backlight, okay, is behind the subject off to the side, across from the fill light. So if you have the fill light over here and you switch those two, then you'll have the backlight over here. Okay. Now, this lighting scenario doesn't work for every single thing, and you're going to have to move lights around to get the exact look that you're looking for. Okay. So this by no means is the only way to light. It's a good start. Okay. So with the backlight, it helps highlight the areas in the back of the object, the head, the hair, the shoulders. So it gives a lot more dimension. Okay. Alright, so anyway, with that said, we're going to kind of take you through this part, and we're going to go to the top view, okay, so you guys can get an idea how we're going to do this. Okay, so let's say the camera's in front here. We've got the key light over here and the fill light over here. Well, I'm going to switch them. I'm going to have the key light over here and the fill light over here. Now, if we have the fill light over here and the camera here, you're going to be able to see shadows, and which is fine. Okay, depends on what you're looking for. And I do want to see those shadows, so we're going to play with those and look at the differences between the two. Let me go back into Maya Standard. There we go. And let's get back to the top view again. I think I lost there is my top view. And I'm going to go in here. Let's reset this a minute. There we go. And then I'm going to go in here and add a light. So I'm going to go to Create, Lights, and we're going to do a directional light. Okay. And let's see, it's pretty small here, isn't it? There it is. It's facing the wrong way. So I'm just going to rotate that. Okay, and I notice I scaled it so I could see it. Okay, we're going to put it over here, right? Alright, so let's make it a little bit smaller. I made it a little bit too big. And just kind of rotate it. There we go. So kind of a 45-degree angle, right? Pretty close. There we go. We'll move it over here a little bit like that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it. So Control D, move that over here. And I'm going to rotate it this way. Okay. Right. I'm going to click on this one again. I'm going to go Control D, and I'm going to move that this way. And then I'm going to rotate it. Here we go, like that. So we have kind of the basic diagram what we saw earlier in that picture that I showed you. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and name this key light. So I'm going to go Control A. Okay. For some reason my channel box got pushed out of there. But anyway, so the idea with this, I'm going to go ahead and double click on that. You can rename it here. We're going to call this key light. Okay. And then we're going to call this fill light. And we're going to call this backlight. They also call it rim light too as well. So I'm going to call it a rim light. Alright, so now we're going to go to this perspective view and zoom out a little bit. You can see that they're way down here. That really doesn't matter where they're at, but I'm going to go ahead and select them all and pull them up. And just above the characters. There we go. And we're going to rotate those, okay? Just ever so slightly down, okay? And something around, let's say, negative 45 degrees, okay? Oops. That's not what I wanted to do. Negative 45. There we go. Okay. And then this one too as well. So that would be negative 45. And then this one will have a stronger angle on it. Okay, something like around -60. Okay, so we can catch more of the head from the back. Okay, it doesn't matter where in space these directional lights are. Think of it as like the sun. It's the rotation value of the object that matters. Okay, and so it doesn't matter if this is down here. Now, I know that it doesn't make much sense to you if you don't work with lighting a lot, but if I had a point light up here and it's really close to the object and I moved it from here to there, it is translate centric, meaning that if I move it down, the light will only, the light rays will go up. With this is a directional light. That means the light goes in one direction no matter whether this is up here or down there. But with a point light, the light rays are spreading out in all 360 degrees. Okay, so if I moved it down, it would just lie down in the bottom. Okay, so directional lights are a little bit different. Alright, so that's kind of how we got our lights set up, and we can kind of mess with this later, but this is good. So far so good. Alright, so the idea now is to kind of look at the intensity. So now I need to go into the light attributes editor. So I'm going to click on the light and go Control A. And that opens up the attribute editor for that light. What I'm going to do is I'm going to turn on Arnold, and I'm going to turn the intensity down to something like 0.5. Now the rule of thumb is you shouldn't have lights that if you combine them with the intensity above 1. That's the rule of thumb in CG. So if this is at 0.5, this is at half of that, 0.25, and this is at half of this, right? Then it can't add up to 1. Okay, so 0.5 plus 0.25, okay, so what would that be, right? 7.75, and then you add, and then 0.25, divide that up, that's 1.25, if that's right. I think that's right, yeah, 0.125. So you see how that all works, and we're below the 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and do that. 0.5, there we go. And we can kind of mess with this. We'll look at see how that works, how that looks. We're going to do 2 on samples. So basically intensity is at 0.5. We're going to do use color temperature, and we're going to type in 6,000 on here. Okay, that's the color temperature. All right, that means that 6500 is basically white or kind of a bluish tint, and if you go higher, it'll get worse. And then as you go down low, it goes through different colors all the way to red. Okay, so the color temperature basically means the color of light or the temperature of light. Okay, and then angle, that's how you soften your shadows. So this is going to emit shadows. I'm going to do 2 on here, and we can play with that. And then with this, we do want it to cast shadows. Do we want to cast volumetric shadows? Well, not really. We're not going to be doing any volumetric fog or anything like that. So let's go ahead and turn that off. Okay, we don't need that. And the rest is good. Okay. Alright, so make sure you pause your video and get the numbers, kind of like what I have here. And then on this one here, the intensity is going to be 0.25, half of the fill light. Of course, again, we can play with this if we want to. And then we're going to do exposure, we're going to match that at 0.25. And then use color temperature, and that's going to be 6,000, right? 6,000. Here we go. Whoa, whoa. See what happens when I go too low. It's all the way red, so let's go 6,000. And then the angle, we don't need to worry about that. Samples, we don't need to worry about that because we're not going to have shadows. We're not going to cast shadows. Okay? All right. Now, if that light tends to make things grainy on the side, the fill light, then we will have to turn the samples up. All right, but right now we don't want cast shadows on. Okay, on that one. Okay, on that light there. All right, so we want cast shadows coming from this light. Okay, that's on. And then this light right here, it's the intensity is lower, and then we turn cast shadows off. Okay, all right. The next one, this one, 0.125, half of 0.25, and then exposure 0.125. There we go. And again, use color temperature, and we're going to do 6,000. Here we go. And then we're going to move down, and we're going to make sure cast volume metric shadows is off, and cast shadows is off. The only light we want to cast shadows is this one. And then with this one, it's just a fill light, and then this one is just a rim light. We don't want them to cast shadows, otherwise you have shadows all over the place. Okay? Alright, so let's see what we have so far for lighting. Let's take a look. And so we start off rendering really low. Also, I like to render with the Arnold preview, which is kind of fun. So I'll show you how to do that. There's different ways to view this, and I'll show you all three. One's a full render, but let's go ahead and look at what we need to set up in the render settings. Okay. And under Arnold Renderer, now just like I asked you guys in Module 1, if you don't see this, you have to go into Settings, Preferences, Plugin Manager, and load it up. But we've already done that, so if you need to watch that video again, go ahead. We're going to go fairly low resolution here. Let's go into HD 540 just to start off with. Okay, and then we're going to start out with the default. Okay, so with that done, there's a couple ways we can render this quickly. We can do a preview render. Let's see what it's doing here. I'm not exactly sure what's happening. I think I got stuck. Okay, great. I'm going to pause. Okay, that took forever. That was weird. Usually it doesn't take that long to get this started. For some reason it got stuck. And so I had to do a couple things. So if that happens, don't worry. I would highly recommend then to make sure that you save your scene, what you have done so far. And let's go in here. I'm going to type in 14. And I'm going to type in render in here. And let's get rid of this wire. There you go. And save that. Before you start rendering, save your scene so you don't have to do your lighting again. And another thing is, I know we're just doing tests, but let's go ahead and turn on the mask. Okay. So that's this guy right here. So you're going to turn on this, the mask size, and then you turn on this one. So you can see, and that will mask the area that you're actually going to render. So now you can get a better idea of how to compose your shot. So let's go ahead and do another quick render. Again, this is one way to do it, and then there's this way, which is really cool too, is render Arnold Render. Okay, and then all you have to do is click on the play, and it shows the render. And what's really cool about this is it's using your viewport, so I can rotate. Isn't that cool? I can rotate in here and get an update pretty quickly. Really, it's not too bad. And that's really cool. I think that's neat. And it shows your textures and stuff. And this basically almost is giving you real-time preview. Very cool. Right, so that way you can kind of mess around with your lights and see how it's looking. Okay. The nice thing about ThreePoint Light system is, let me close that a minute, and let's get back into viewport. There we go. Is that you can go in here and make changes to your lights. Okay. And move things around, rotate things, and in real time. Now it's kind of hard to do in viewport. That's why we have this one up here, Arnold. Let's open that up again. I'll give you kind of a preview. So if I move this, it should update in here. Let's go ahead and update that. There we go. And if I move the light, Let's see if I can do that real quick. Now, let me see if I can do that in real time for you. If I move this light like this, see how the shadows change? Look at that. Very cool. And so you can see when you're rendering what looks best or what you like better. Okay. Very cool. Let me get that. Again, it doesn't matter where it is in the scene, it's the actual rotation of that light that makes a difference. Okay. So if I take that light and let me zoom out a little bit and scale it and get that closer to the head, notice that doesn't make any changes there. Then I can kind of, while I'm rotating that light, I can get a better idea how the shadows look in real time, which is kind of cool. I like that. Alright. Alright, cool. And then we can move it this way a little bit like this. You can see how you can flatten it out. Add shadows. We want to have some shadows in here. Maybe a little bit. And maybe bring it down a little bit more. There we go. Cool. Alright, so I think I'm okay with that. You know, that looks pretty good. And then the last thing we're going to do, okay, let me close that, is once you get your lights set up, we're going to do one more thing before we do a final render, just kind of get an idea what the final render will look like. Is get the head situated, and then what we're going to do is going to go and add a dome light. So I got my my light set up, but then we need to go into Arnold and click on creating a Skydome. Okay, now Skydome works really well. And another thing I want to introduce is HDR Images, high dynamic range imaging. And those types of HDR images really help with the Skydome, and it really helps with metallic objects. But these are all we want to keep. We want to make sure that the skin looks and feels like skin. But oils do reflect the environment, and we all have oil on our skin. So to make a skin tone really look correct, you need to have an HDR image. Now, we're not to that point, but I wanted to mention it to you and kind of take you through that part of it. I'm going to get that set up real quick. I'll be right back. Okay, it's called HDR Haven. And there it is. And it's 100% royalty free. And if you want your stuff to look more photorealistic and looking a little more natural, you're going to need to use HDR images for your scenes. So I'm going to pick something real quick as an indoor that I feel works really good. We're going to click on the small Cathedral 02. If you can't find that, go ahead and search it. Where's the search engine? Where did he put it? Anyway, find small Cathedral 02. Click on it, and we're going to do 2K. We don't want to spend a whole lot of time. Let's just do a quick 2K, which is fine. And pop that in. After that download, shouldn't take long. Go to Show in Folder and copy and paste it into the space that you are actually using your project in, wherever that may be. I'm not even sure. I think that's it. Okay, so there I put it in my source images folder, and we're done with that. So let's go ahead and add it in here. And so where does that go? That actually goes into your color channel at the very top. So your color channel, right? So the Skydome is a little different than a shader. It has its own shader that we need to kind of focus on. We're going to click on the color, click on the file, and then click off for filter type, and then we need to find it in here. Hopefully I got it in there right. There it is, Small Cathedral, the very last one. And that's what it looks like. Okay, click on open. There we go. Perfect. And this is going to help us a lot with just getting the right look for our skin and making it a little more natural. Again, we could have probably used a more neutral HDR image, but I just wanted, we need something to kind of set this up. And so there are bright sides to this. If I zoom out, you can see that if I kind of rotate around in here, you can see there's that big opening. There's a lot of light coming through there, which is fine. I don't have an issue with that. Does it match the lighting you have? Let's take a look. So here's my key light, and that's the light with the most light coming from. So it's not exactly rotating properly the right direction. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take click on my HDR image and just rotate it so it matches my key light, which is this one right here. Okay, so you can see if I scale this, just to give you an idea, I do this a lot where I scale and then I move and I make sure that the light's coming from the same direction, you see. Okay, that's how I do it, and it works fairly well. Just have to scale those light rays up so I can see the directional light up so I can see what I'm doing. There we go. So that looks pretty good. I'll just move that back again. Very happy with that. And another thing that I do too, just to see what the lighting looks like without all these lights, what I end up doing sometimes is just turning the intensity down. I already know what the intensity is for these guys. If you turn them off, okay, it's easy to do. You can turn off all three of these. Okay, now if you just turn off illuminates by default, it should just turn it off. Okay, so let's just turn these off just for fun, see what it looks like, and give it a render. Okay, now it shouldn't take long to render. Now if we had subsurface scattering, that would take quite a long time. So let's go ahead and just see what it looks like here. We'll play with it a little bit. I love lighting. That's my thing. That's something I really love to do. And normally when you have an HDR image, it looks pretty good right out of the box, and it's giving us some nice looking images already. But it's a little bit too strong, a little bit too bright. So what we can do is just turn that down a bit, you know. Because you know, in real life that's probably what it would look like. Really, seriously, that's a good energy, but it's a little bit too strong right now. So I'm gonna just click on it and turn the intensity down pretty good to 0.25. I know that sounds radical. Exposure should be the same, 0.25. Alright, so we're using an HDR image, so you don't need to use color temperature. Don't set that up. But we do need the resolution to match the resolution of the image, which is 2K, so it's 2000. There we go. And we want samples. It's a little grainy, so we're going to turn the samples up, and now that will slow your render down the higher you go, but the smoother it will look, the shadows anyway. Volume samples, we really aren't doing cast volume shadows, so we're going to turn those off. Everything else looks pretty good. Now the camera, I don't really want to see the background. I just like it pure black. That helps set your models out. Normally, if this was a real, I mean, you had the rest of the body and you had the whole full character, I would be okay with seeing the background, because we could do like depth of field and do some fun things with that, and I'm okay with that, and maybe do a background or some kind of a pedestal. But normally I like to have a dark gray or a black background, depending on what you have as far as colors go, your color scheme. So we're going to go full black, so we'll just go ahead and tell you how to do that. So if you bring this down, we go from white to black. Okay, so when it's full on and you have an HDR image, you'll show that. But if you turn this all the way down, it will render it as black. So let me give you kind of a preview on what that looks like. Okay, so that looks pretty good. So this is what we had before, and you can see that we've turned down the light to 0.25 and it's made it a lot more interesting. And now I can start adding all my lights in here now. This is a great start, okay? Now, a lot of times I'll do my Skydome. It really depends. My personal preference is to start with a Skydome, but since I was teaching you about a 3-point light system, that's why I did that first. And then I turn those off so we can see the Skydome. But I usually start with a Skydome first, let the HDR natural light illuminate the object first, and then start adding lights if I need it. Okay, so it actually looks really good, except it looks like plastic, or some people would call it porcelain, but it looks like a really buffed plastic to me. So what we want to do is we want to push the roughness out a little bit more on the skin. Okay, let's kind of play with that a little bit. It's kind of fun. If you have a fast computer, your rendering it's only 11 seconds. Waiting 11 seconds is not that big of a deal. You can also, if you want to, if you don't want to wait that long, you get a faster preview when using Arnold renderer. Okay, and so that works out pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and select. I'm going to go ahead and stop this. Okay, let me tell you, when you're running this, you have to stop it to be able to. It runs really slow unless your graphics card is insanely good, like a 2080 Ti, or you're using a Titan. Yeah, that's insane. But so what you can do here is with the background select. No, actually, we don't want the background. We want the texture selected, and go back into the skin shader here, and we're going to play with the roughness. Okay, as we render, if it lets us. Okay, so now I'm going to play with the roughness here and move that up until it flattens out. You can see what happens now. Look at that. Isn't that wonderful? So we're flattening it out to something around 0.5 or 0.6. You can see that it's really starting to look like skin now. Okay, instead of a porcelain doll or a piece of plastic, we still have highlights there. There's no doubt about it. They're there. Okay, and we still have IOR, index of refraction, which is good. But you can see how this really spreads that out. Okay. All right. So, the only way to really know is to go in here and find a reference image. Okay, of not studio lighting. I'm going to close this a minute. I just hit the box. Not just studio lighting, but I'm going to go online really quick and kind of give you a reference of what human skin looks like out in the sun. Okay, just hold on a minute. Okay, so I went out and found it's very difficult to find. You can type in model and direct sunlight, and the thing is, they have kickers on the sides. Photographers love to flatten out the images because that's how you're. Nobody wants shadows. But when I actually critique your work, I need to see those shadows. That helps me see your geometry. So in real life, people put in fill lights, kicker lights, even when they're outside, or reflection that reflects the sun on the other side. So they try to flatten the image out because basically human skin looks best when there's no harsh shadows. But this is a Tumblr picture, and this is a great picture to kind of show because it's not been, it's been, she's holding her camera, so she's got harsh shadows and all that stuff, and it's great. So it shows the real skin tone. So what you're looking for is that we don't see a porcelain. We might see a little bit more, but we're really close. It spreads out. It collects light. Your skin still collects the light because of the oils that are at the surface of the skin. It reflects the light, so it's still reflecting. The oil will reflect the environment, so that's really super important. I think a lot of people forget how skin really looks, and the only way to know is to actually look at real life examples. And this is a real life example because she's taking a picture for Tumblr. So you get the idea. You have to look at references, especially lighting references, to help you get photorealistic results. So let's go ahead and move that out of the way. And so that's the idea. So we're super close. We could go a little bit lower on the roughness. Go ahead and play that again. And maybe bringing it down a little bit more and kind of look and see if we can get some more highlights here. Depends on how oily the skin is. You know, how long has it been since the skin's been washed, right? We can also mess around with the diffuse roughness too as well. That may help spread things out a little bit more, but the whole idea is that we're able to control the roughness, and we could spread it all the way out, and it would be you would basically create a flat look, which we don't want to do that. Alright, so again, it's kind of between 4.5 and 5 is what I would say that you could be okay with. Okay, and if we did 4.5, the skin is really oily. And then any lower than that would be really like somebody threw some water on it. And then we could bring and mess around with the IOR too as well. Okay. All right, so I'm going to spread this up just a little more. Let's say something like 0.475 on that. Okay. So enough of that. I know I don't want to spend too much of your time, but just kind of play with that a little bit so you can get an idea of what it would look like. Now let's kind of see what it looks like now with all our lights on. So let's turn that off. And I'm going to turn this off too as well. And we're just going to turn all those lights back on. So it illuminates by default. Illuminates by default. And let's do this one at a time, just for fun. So we've got, let's go ahead and do a render without this. Okay, see what it looks like. Do full render. So we can see the entire render. It's going to be a little different than what Arnold's preview is going to be. And then I'm going to click on this guy right here, which actually puts it in memory. So I can go back to it. Okay, and then I'm going to minimize that. Zoom out a little bit. Click on that light and turn that light on. And then I'm going to go ahead and render this again. Okay, I'm going to pause the video so you don't. Okay, that's with the directional light, the key light on. I'm going to put that into memory. And then I'm going to minimize and then turn on the next light. This will be the fill light. Okay, and then I'm going to go ahead and render. Okay, so that's with the key light and the fill light. Let's go ahead and put that in. And then we're going to do the rim light. And let's turn that on. And then we're going to go ahead and do another render. Put that in. Do another render. There we go. Okay, there we go. So, let's take a look at these. Alright, so we start off with the render that we have. That's just the dome light. Okay, that's basically just the light bouncing around inside that little dome that we had. The HDR image, that's just that. And then we add the key light. And notice we notice that the light changes, and you can see the light bouncing around the face, and we also are starting to see sharp shadows. Okay, so that's what's missing. And then we go to the key light, and then you can see that between you can see that filling in that area there, so flattening that image out just a little bit more. Okay, and we could probably add a little more key if we wanted to, so it's not so prominent. So you can see the difference between the key light and then we add the fill light, and then we've got the rim light, which is almost impossible to see. I don't see any difference except right here. You can see that would highlight the hair, let's say. You can see how that works, because that's with the rim light. You can see I'm going between what we had with the key light and the fill light to the rim light. You can see the top right up here. Yep. So the rim light is working. Okay, you can see it's very subtle. Okay, it's supposed to be. And that's it. So that's the render I want from you. but I need it at HDR 1080. Alright, so that can take some time. Alright, so let's go ahead and set up the render for that. And I'm very happy with how it looks. We got some space between them, and let's go ahead and do a full render. Let's get that set up. And we're going to do this at 5 and 3 and 3, and this will really slow things down. Don't expect like maybe 15-16 minute renders. We're going to set that at 12, 2, and 2. Okay. This ray depth is the bounce light, and the diffuse basically is letting us, is going to give us more depth in the color, and the roughness and the transmission. We don't really need to go higher, but the transmission is for like subsurface scattering. We really don't have any of that going on. And then transparency depth. That's basically self-explanatory. Anything that's transparent or translucent will benefit from this higher number, but we're going to go ahead and type these in, and that looks good. And then in the comments tab, of course, you can go ahead and pause the video to get all those numbers. And then in here, we're going to do HD 1080. You guys know I love to have you render at HD 1080. That's the standard. Alright, so let's go ahead and do render, and we'll come back when it's all finished. But I'm going to pause it because it does take a long time. Okay, my render time was about 3 minutes and 12 seconds. So the idea is that you need to save this, and this is super important. So File, Save Image As, go into the option box, and make sure you have Color Managed Image is selected. Click on Apply and Close. This does not mean you just saved your image. You need to go into File, Save Image, and then you can go ahead and save the image. I need a JPEG. You can save it as a PNG or Targa, and then give me a JPEG if you want to. I always save my stuff as PNG. I do want it as a JPEG though. So the reason why I send you PNG is usually uncompressed, so you can use it over and over again. But JPEG is something that I like to see when you're sending stuff to me. In fact, that's all I'm going to ask for. Alright, so with that said, you need to go ahead and name this appropriately. Your first name, last name, underscore Annie 235. This is module 02, and this is render. We'll just call this 1. We already know it's a perspective. Go ahead and save that. And I'm saving it to the images folder. I'm going to save it to the desktop folder so it's easy for me to get a hold of. And then the only thing I need is maybe a render from the other side. So let's go ahead and do that real quick. So minimize that and just rotate the camera like that, and zoom in, get it kind of centered, and then we'll do another render, and we'll pause because that takes time. Okay, just got done rendering, and this was at 3 minutes 15 seconds. So let's go ahead and make sure you save this as well. Let's see, there's the render. We're going to do number 2 on this one, and make sure it is a JPEG. There we go. Save that. And then one last one is from the back view. Okay, let's go from the high resolution, the high poly, so you can see that. Make sure you have a gap between the two. There we go. And go ahead and render that. Okay, we're back, and if anything, that looks good. That's fine. It looks a little dark back here, but that's okay. It shows everything and anything that I need to see. I'm looking for a smooth surface, and you can tweak that out with your low poly and getting the vertices moved around. And you can also hit the 3 key when you're in low poly to help move things and smooth things around. Anyway, so this is the last render. And we're going to do some wireframe on renders real quick. So let's go ahead and save this. Let's say number 3 on this one. And then we're going to do our wireframes real quick. We only need one wireframe because I've got enough information from your screenshots, so we'll just do one. So save your work. Let's go and save your work. 15. There we go. Delete. And let's go ahead and select those two and go to Assign New Material. Go to Arnold Shader, and we're going to go to AI Wireframe. AI Wireframe, and this is what we need to change. So go from edge type from triangles to polygons, and then we can re-render that real quick. Alright, let's go ahead and save that. That'll be saved as. Save that out. And we'll just type in 4 on that one. Okay. And then let's get the back real quick. Like that. And render that out. File, save as. There you go, and save. Alright, so now you've got everything you need to turn in. So look for the turn in instructions video, and hope you have a fun week, and congratulations, you're all finished. So once you get the turn in instructions, get all your folders created, look for that video, and that's going to be below this one, and then you're good to go, and I'll see you in module 3 where we're going to start working on the character body. Alright, I'll see you then.